It is now 3 o'clock. We're delighted that you have decided to join us. We hope that you will find today informative. And once again, just as a reminder, this is the budget workshop. So you will be able to hear everything that's going on. You should have received a sheet of paper that looks a little bit like this. If you can see, it's sort of a one-page computation. This is just to remind you that you will not be able to participate today, but we invite you to write down any questions that you might have. And after the board meeting in February, we will have an evening town hall meeting. And at that time, you will be able to ask any question you want that's arising from today or over the next month. Without further ado, I want to remind those of us that are participating today here to please turn down your cell phones, put it on vibrate or something so that we don't hear anything. Amy, do we have a quorum of the board?
We have a quorum.
Okay. At this time, for those here and listening in, I would like to introduce Glenn Saylor, a member of the board and the liaison to the Finance Committee. Glenn, go ahead.
According to our schedule, we are having an introduction of the staff of the Financial Advisory Committee. And as you can see, we have with us today Shirley Burrows, Mary Ellen Gates, yes, Chuck Gordon, Jim Nash will be joining us, Jerry Stein. These are the 5 members of this financial committee. We have with us, of course, you can see Jim Morgan. Our office manager is Kimberly Evans. And we have activities director, Kara Hardy is available. According to this, we have member comments. I don't know if there are any before we start. The way this procedure is handled as it has been in the past, we have divided up the budget. Each of the members will speak about a portion that they have agreed to work with. We'll start out with the administrative, and that will be Shirley Burrows. Utilities will be handled by Chuck Gordon. Landscaping will be handled by Jim Nash. The gate entry and control service, repair and maintenance will be handled by Jerry Stein. Clubhouse operations will be handled by Chuck Gordon. Taxes by Shirley Burrows. Reserves will be handled by Jim Nash. That's on the expenses side. On the income side, owner's assessments and other income, I will speak to that. Finance Committee has prepared a draft budget for the upcoming 21-22 budget year. This task is our major undertaking for the year and been working on this project starting last December. Copies were provided to the board earlier this week. For today's interactive workshop, we will present the main elements of the draft, focusing on those particular line items that were adjusted for the current year's budget. The draft was developed by reviewing current and past actual expenses and includes adjustments to contracts with our major vendors. As you will see, some expenses have been reduced, some have been increased. The committee will present each major section of the budget, starting with the expense side, followed by the income side. I would suggest that any board member comments or questions be raised as each individual line item is presented. You will see in the presentation box, there will be several slides and they will be going through them line by line. If there are no questions at this time, I will turn it over to Shirley Burrows to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Glenn. First of all, I'd like to thank the Board of Directors for their attention to this presentation of the Finance Committee's recommendation for the budget for the new year. And I love saying the new year. It's hyphenated 2021-22. So I just came up with that today. I thought it was pretty funny. Yeah. We will do, as Glenn said, changes only. You can imagine with a $5.1 million budget, there are a lot of lines, and we will be discussing those that did not have a change for the new year. So we will begin with expenses, because our expenses for the organization drive the revenue. So we're going to talk about expenses first. The administrative section is the largest as far as expenses dollars are concerned. The overall change for the whole budget is $111,000, or a 2.2% increase. So we begin with line 29, which is bank charges. We're currently trending below the budget. And so the suggestion has been made that we reduce that line item from $500 to $200 for the new year. It's a minor item, but there was a change. Next, we're looking at line 33. This is dues and subscriptions. Our budget last year was $5,000. We're anticipating an increase in some of those subscriptions. And the description of this expense item is lengthy, but it covers such things as Sam's Club, our newspapers, other subscriptions, Chamber of Commerce, our colony dues for the board and for our management company are in this expense item. And so there's a number of things in here. We are anticipating an increase of $690 to $56.90. And I would say that work has already been done and will continue to be done to see if we can reduce some of those costs as we go through, which really is how we handle everything. Yes, sir.
Question, Shirley, on this.
Yes, sir.
I know that for most of us who live here, when I see the Press Enterprise subscription of $1,150, I know there's one copy that goes on the round table here for people to read. Is this a subscription for one copy? And if so, a number of us here in the colony, most people in here, get the newspaper for approximately $100 a year. I'm wondering why we're paying $1,500 to them. If you could give a rationale what's going on.
Thank you for the question, Walt. We in our committee did discuss that very item, and I'm going to let Jim Morgan field it because he did he did answer us during that discussion, and some work has already been done on that. So Jim, would you answer that?
What line item are we on?
We're on line 33.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Well, first, let me make the statement that since the clubhouse has been closed, we have canceled or put a hold on all of the papers, the periodicals that we receive. So we are currently not paying for any papers. With that being stated, we had concerns with the price that we had been charged by Press Enterprise, and we've approached them several times with concerns that the pricing isn't right. And we get the quotes, and the budget line reflects what those quotes are of what it would cost for receiving papers 365 days a year. Now, with that being stated, we intend in the future to approach the paper completely differently. We were approaching it on an annual basis, which you would think would give us more of a reduction, but it hasn't panned out that way. So what we're going to do in the future is approach it on a more short-term basis, where we might be able to take better advantage of different specials that they might be running, or again, the threat to cancel the paper a lot of times is a negotiation point for them to give you a much better price break on the subscription. So that's what our intent is going forward. But the line item you see in there and the amount of money is what they are quoting us, and it's ridiculous. We agree. So either we need to again address it in a different way to try to lower the price, or move on to another paper.
Glenn, can you see when a board member raises their hand, or do I have to let you know? Tom Bracken and Joanne both have their hands up. Can you see
Tom?
that, or can you
Yes,
see that, or?
I can see that now. Tom?
You know, you can go to a dollar store and for a whole year of that paper, you can get it for $246.
I think they're looking into that, Tom. I think that's what Jim's alluding to.
The paper there is 50 cents for a daily paper. Saturday and Sunday paper is $1. And that works out to $246 a year.
Who had the other question?
Joanne?
Joanne?
This came up in the past 2 years because it's outrageous. I mean, I don't even ask for renewal. I just go directly to cancellation and talk to them, and I always get the right price.
Yeah.
If most people are getting this one at home, I would cancel this one because the one they're not getting is like the Wall Street Journal and so forth. But
Well,
this is a local.
we get a bit of a line when we call, and I don't know if it's because we're commercial or what it might be, but we get the speech that, you know, the paper copy is a dying proposition and costs
true.
are skyrocketing. So in order for them to survive, they have to charge these amounts. And, you know, we get the song and dance that, again, I'm not saying we are in agreement with it and just live with it. We are going to actively look at other avenues to either lower the cost of it ultimately, or again, move on to a periodical that is better priced, and that it's still going to give us some level of local news.
Yeah, I would like your confirmation on that because this is ridiculous. I would never pay this amount of money for a newspaper.
I think we've worked that over pretty well. Shirley, I think you could continue. Jim is going to take a look at that. So
Thank you, Jim, very much. And thank you for the questions. Moving on to line 34, which is office equipment maintenance. This line item covers the lease for our copier in the office, and it also covers lease repairs as well. And we have had more lease repairs in the last year than the prior year. We anticipate that as we use the copier more, as it becomes older, that the repairs do have to be provided for. It's our obligation. The question has been asked, where are we in this lease? We have at least 1, if not 2 more years to go on this lease, so we can't just walk away from it. We will.
I did confirm we're in the last year of this
Okay.
lease, so
All right.
we can look to better the situation.
Thank you. So we will look at a good lease and a good machine, and hopefully the $6,000 that we're anticipating for next year may be the last year at that level. But we wanted to make sure that we had enough in the budget to cover the costs that are anticipated. Moving on to line 41, which is the newsletter service. That's a decrease, hooray, of $2,500 because we are not printing the newspaper anymore. Image Up Now prepares and publishes the Colony's newspaper at no cost because it now contains very beautifully advertising. So that's a plus of $2,500.
And if I could comment also on that, just state that the previous year to that, it was $35,000 that we were budgeting. The number that was taken out completely this year was just a number for miscellaneous expenses as we transitioned from doing it in-house to outsourcing it.
Joanne?
Grant has a question.
We were actually over budget this year only because we didn't transition as quickly as we thought we could. So we actually had to pay for it for 2 or 3 months before the
That's
cost.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's all good news for next year.
any other
So-
questions? Amy, you have a question on this?
Moving on then to line 42, which are our salaries and benefits. We anticipate that this line will go up $26,490, which is an estimated 3% increase. The majority of this estimate estimated increase is based on the statewide mandatory minimum hourly wage increase, which will be at $15 by 2022. So it goes up each year, and that is mandated. And as the minimum wage goes up, of course, when you look at the whole team, you increase other people's salaries, not particularly a like amount, but at least a fair amount, in order to keep everything rolling forward. The mandatory minimum hourly wage, of course, is not voluntary. It is something that we live with because the law indicates that we will. So the 3% is a $26,490 increase, and that actually is the largest increase in this administrative area. And are there questions, Amy?
Amy?
Was the actual 918,000, was that what happened this year?
Yes.
Well, let me qualify that. It's based on, there is a percentage of that number that was plugged for overtime hours, and that's just dictated based on how much we use, which has been very little this year because of the pandemic. Actually, I don't think we've had, since the pandemic, any overtime hours we've been approving.
Right,
So-
so the 918 is actual, but it would have been more had we had events.
That's not actual.
No,
It's not actual, that's the
budgeted amount.
budget.
Oh, okay, that was my
That's
question.
the budget for the year.
Okay, but we don't know what the actual it was.
Yes, I do know as of December 31st, it was $574,998.
Wow, okay.
Tom Bracken's got his hand up.
Glenn,
Sorry about that, Tom. Go ahead.
on your budget thing here,
Can't hear you.
why don't we have the actual cost on, when you're on 2019-20, that was certified, the actual cost of every item on that line?
I think we were trying to compare one year's budget to the last year's budget. The actuals, I don't know that they're all available at this particular time, but I'm sure they've taken that into consideration in the draft. Is that not correct, Jim Morgan?
They are with some
Well-
work. I wrote them all in.
Yeah.
No, we do have actuals, but for the sake of not confusing the process, and we've done this every year, we compare budget to budget. Now, the committee approaches the budget using comparison not only to prior budgets, trending, budget assumptions based on providers giving us specific numbers that they need in order to provide the services the following year, as well as comparing to prior year's actuals. So, the committee did have a spreadsheet of actuals for the 2019 or 2018-19 year and the 2019-20 year. Of course, this current year we're in now, you can't do a fair
I understand.
comparison because it's not a full year.
I understand that, but wouldn't it be more helpful for everybody, especially me, if you had an actual what it really did cost you?
Well, in some cases, yes, but there might be some expenses that were anomalies that year for some reason. They were an out of the ordinary expense, and it might look like your expenses were up when they really weren't. It's a one-time cost, some scenarios like that, or a savings potentially too. But
Yeah, but I think.
again, that's why we've always stuck to budget comparison as opposed to actuals. But to answer your question,
I don't give you a true story.
well, to answer your specific question about the salaries,
I'm not talking about salaries, or I'm talking about other items too, Jim. The whole.
okay, well, I was going to say that we do have the actuals on that.
The 19 to 20, I think for everybody, it should be at least listed the year you can give them. I mean, you're just giving what you opposed to what it was going to cost. It might only cost, if one item would cost 18,000, maybe it only cost 17,000 on that year. That's what I'm talking about, that year when you can have the actual budget that's already in.
Glenn?
Yeah, go ahead, Joanne.
Tom, I tend to agree with you. I like to see what the actuals were too. So I got a report, I think that Jim Nash had done, and I wrote in on all 10 pages. And then I took the Decembers from this year and wrote in the year to date. I like that picture. I don't know that everybody does, but I like to know what the actuals were as well as the budget.
Yes.
Bill?
You're muted.
You're muted, Bill.
Um,
I'm sorry, I have a question about the 26,000 versus the 3%. Which one came first?
we-
Did we figure out it was gonna be 26,000 more and which equated to 3%? Or did we say we need 3% more and that equates to 26,000? I'm just curious.
We applied 3% across the board and it ended up at 26,490.
So
That's just a budget plug number.
Okay.
When I'm evaluating employee performance, the merit increases are based on that, how they score.
okay.
So
Amy?
No, I'm sorry, I was stretching.
Any more
Been
questions?
a long day.
Yes, it has.
Where are
Shirley,
we?
would you like to continue? Oh, I'm sorry,
Certainly.
Mary Ann, did you have a question?
Where are we?
We're on item
Finishing
number-
line 42.
Thank
hey,
you.
Jim, how you
And
doing?
here's Jim Nash. Welcome.
Thank you, Jim.
I've been on for a few minutes here.
Okay.
It just came
Yeah,
through.
Shirley, would you like to continue, please?
Certainly. Line 48 then is staff uniforms, a decrease of $500 because the budget we put together, the increase in the budget we put together last year was actually not needed. And so it's a flat budget with the year before. So we took $500 back out again. And so that's a recommendation. So that's good news as well. And then on to line 51, the most popular part of the budget, legal services. This particular part of the legal services is for collections. We're currently trending a bit higher than the budget and higher than prior year. We are wanting to commit and put forth an effort to reduce delinquencies that we have on our books, on our aging. And so we are recommending that we increase this line item from 7,000 to 10,000. We do have more accounts that we're going to be sending to legal. And we've also been informed recently that the firm Epstein will no longer be doing assessment collections, and we are going to another outside firm. And so we really, that's an unknown factor at this point. We're anticipating that hopefully that it will be close, but with the increase in the effort to collect the uncollected items on our balance sheet, we anticipate that the collection services cost will also go up.
Any questions on line 51?
And on to line 52, legal services lawsuits. This line item has increased from, or we're recommending it, from $100,000 to $135,000. Part of it is that we have two major lawsuits right now, currently involved with the Majestic Asset Management. Those are the owners of the golf course, as you all know. We have an enforcement of the judgment, which is the original trial. And then we have action to void a trust deed that they've put forward that we feel is not correct. So we're anticipating an increase in those legal services. As far as the bottom line, we will be talking a bit more about that when Jim Nash and Glenn, well, it's actually Glenn, talk about the revenue side of it. So it's not all bad news, although it does feel like a large increase. On to line 54
Shirley?
then. Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you have a
Shirley,
question?
Very quickly, if I take line 50, 51, 52, just for legal services, we're up over $200,000. Is that a correct assumption?
We are up 3,000, 35,000, which is 38. And
195.
145.
Well, I'm adding the 60 and the 10 is 70 and 135 puts us up over 200,000 on a yearly basis.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking at. So
205.
I'm just
yeah.
clarifying
okay,
that it relates to legal services. We're up over $200,000.
Yeah, just over, yeah.
Okay.
Shirley, on line 52, if we're successful in winning those lawsuits, we then sue for our legal fees to be returned, right?
which would be a future
Yeah, so that would come
collection.
back, would come back into that same account.
Likely, yes.
Maybe.
Dell?
Well, when you said we were up 205, we're not up 205, that's the budget, right?
Right.
We're
Yeah,
at
okay.
205. Yeah, that's
Well,
what I was
we're at
adding.
38.
Yeah,
We'll explain how we're handling that under income.
yes.
So Jim, where Shirley, where is the money that has been awarded to us but not collected yet from the courts from Majestic? We have a
30
payment that's supposed to be coming our way.
33,000.
Is
Well, that's not reflected in the budget. We don't know when we would receive that, so.
Is there an asterisk somewhere so that people out there that have heard that they owe us money and we keep in mind that we're waiting for that? And I'm assuming it would go against one of these lines.
Well,
Of
what
course.
the board has done with other attorney's fees that it has received regarding the golf course lawsuit, you've set that aside in a special bank account for future costs that are related to legal costs on these lawsuits. So my feeling is that's what the board will continue to do as it collects attorney's fees when they're awarded by the court. But that'll be further explained or in more detail as to how that is affecting this budget when we talk about income, which is at the end of this, towards the end of the workshop. It'll make more sense to you then.
I understand. My question is this, though, and I don't mean to beleaguer it. And I think up to now, the 330-some thousand that's sitting there, at what point are we going to take some of this money in judgments coming back and immediately apply it to the budgets because it's our residents that are paying it? And I think
Again, that's
I think
the
we-
committee feels it's getting ahead of ourselves if we explain that right now.
Okay, all right.
It's going to be explained in detail during the income portion. That
Okay,
will answer that question.
thank you.
Okay.
Welcome. Thank you for the question. All right, then we'll move to line 54, which is the management extras. These are miscellaneous costs, but we haven't had a lot. It typically is a mailing that is necessary throughout the year that we weren't planning on. But because we are running under the budget, we have reduced this budget from 2,000 to 1,000. So that's a good news item.
So if I, just so there's no confusion on anybody listening in, if you don't mind, Shirley, what she means by an extra mailing, it wouldn't be a mailing that would go out of this office from my management team here on site. It would be like if the board had asked Associa to send a statement, because we're on the coupons to pay your monthly assessments, but you wanted to make sure all the homeowners were aware of what the status was of their account. So they asked Associa to send statements to everybody. Because we contract for coupons, the statements would be an additional cost because they're not contracted for. There's a hard cost for that. So that would be an extra. And so
And
we
the good
haven't
news
had a
is
lot of that.
we haven't had any, so
Yeah, any. So it made sense to reduce it.
good. All right, moving on to line 56, which is election services. $7,500 has not been budgeted in prior years because this was the first year that we've utilized an outside service, but California state law governing homeowner associations elections has changed. And it becomes much more difficult to get to the end of an election with using volunteers because staff is not allowed to be involved in the election process anymore. And so we are relying on the services of an outside services. They're professionals. We use them this year, and we anticipate that we will be using them in future years. Joanne?
But that's not really an overall $7,500 increase because we were already paying around $4,000 for us to send out the mailing. It's really not, Jim, you know the exact figures, but it's nowhere near half of that.
Yeah, but those costs would typically fall under some other administrative areas of the budget. So since we're paying a specific service for it, it makes sense to go ahead and line that out in the budget. But you're right. There's probably a $1,500 to $2,000 difference between what we've done in the past with doing it in-house versus this service. And I think taking the headache away, it's for the association and how smoothly this last election ran, it's well worth that few extra dollars that we're paying for it. It's not literally, like you say, that $7,500.
So it may be that there is another line item that has a reduction in some costs.
That's what I was going to
used to pay for the volunteer work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Moving on to the utility section.
Can I
any
finish?
more questions? I'm sorry.
That's okay. Let me finish, Glenn, and then we'll move on. Thank you. The total administration is $1,651,950 and is 33% of the total expenses for 2021-22. That section is up $66,580 or a 4% increase over prior year expenses. Now, Mr. Saylor, you may move on.
Okay, moving on to utilities. Thank you, Shirley.
You're welcome.
Chuck Gordon, you're up. Where would you like to start?
Well, I'd like to start summarizing the utilities. It's on.
Move up closer, Chuck, to your. We can't hardly hear you. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
I'll speak louder.
Good.
The utilities, page 5, lines 60 to 64, consists of 5 particular categories: electric, gas, water, cable TV services, plus trash and recycling. I'm pleased to inform the board that based on last year's performance and this year's expectations, the committee is recommending a reduction in the budget from $161,400 2020 to $156,700. This represents a reduction of $4,700 or a 2.9% decrease. There's basically 3 components of the utilities budget where there was a change. The first one is on line 60. That's electric service. We're recommending that we go down from $105,000 in the last year's budget to $95,000. This would be a decrease of $10,000 or 9.5% reduction over last year. Alternatively, on line 61, under gas service, we're proposing an increase from $36,000 last year to $41,000. Even though we, for the first 7 months, have been trending a little under budget, although there was a big jump in the December budget, which I'm still trying to get wrap my mind around with Jim, we're still at a budget. However, we believe that we need to increase this because COVID-19 pandemic was one of the attributes that caused the budget to be a little lower this year. But in past years, we've been trending over budget. So we think it would be prudent to increase this area of the budget an additional $5,000 or 14%. The actuals in prior years were $45,200, and in the 2018 budget, it was a whopping $56,800. So going from $41,000 to $46,000 at the very least is prudent. last but not least, the only other area of the utilities budget where there's been a change has been trash and recycling. And that is just going up a very, very modest $300. And the only reason for that is because the service vendor is increasing some rates. Otherwise, we would have kept it the same. So the net is that utilities is going down a little bit. It's the only portion of our budget that is. The committee feels we're comfortable that we're going to be able to hold the line at this budget, maybe a little lucky and even come under the budget for next year. So we are recommending that the board thoughtfully consider recommending the utility budget as is.
Are there any questions? Oh, Walt?
Shirley, given, or Jim, anybody here, given that the Waste Management is only collecting green waste every other week, is there a savings to the community from them? Are we getting a rebate for the 26 weeks that they're not going to be given a service?
This is for the clubhouse trash. So we don't have green waste collection for the clubhouse. So this is in no way relation to your home service. This is only the clubhouse waste. And all of our green waste is removed by EC.
Go ahead. Okay.
Are there any questions? Oh, Dell?
And mute. Okay. I have a question. Is the telephone bill somewhere else? Did we already go over that?
Yeah, they're in another section.
Okay.
Okay, if there are no more questions, we will move on to the landscape. And that will be Mr. Jim Nash.
It's Dell, line 45 is where you'll find telephone.
Thank you.
And it actually went down.
What item are we on?
Oh, yeah.
Landscaping,
Landscape, right?
69,
What page?
60, and line 69.
Got it.
Jim,
Thank you.
can you hear us?
You're welcome.
Jim Nash, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
The annual budget for landscape services includes common areas in all homeowner front yards, as you know, and the part of the landscape part of the budget accounts for 31% of the total annual budget. The total contract for ECLM for the current year is $988,900. And the proposed contract calls for the upcoming year is $1,018,600. That's an increase of $29,700 or 3%. Now, under the current provisions of the contract with ECLM, the increase could have been as much as 5%, according to the contract. However, Jim Morgan was able to negotiate a smaller increase, and I think all the credit goes to him for that effort. Now, the landscape contract is divided into 7 sections, and the first section is page 70, which has the front yards, and they're across the board. All 7 sections are all 3%. So on the next 7 slides, we have the individual amount of money that's dedicated to each section. First one here is front yards, which has an increase of $13,291. On the next slide, we have the landscape contract for the wild areas, which increased $2,456. Next slide shows the green belts, which has an increase of $10,261. Next is the clubhouse, $1,336. And then we have the three gates that are separate. Jackson Gate increased $925, Cal Oaks Gate $554, and the Nutmeg Gate $840. Any questions on that?
Just a question, Jim. And I think I understand it, but I think we're going to have residents who may ask the question on line number 72, who seem to think that we're going to, one reason we're covering our green belts up and everything, we're supposed to be cutting down water. Where's the savings? And yet all of a sudden we're showing a $10,000 increase. I would imagine that may be a question that might come up a month from now. And I don't know what the committee's answer might be for that. And so I'm just throwing that out there.
I think it's a valid question.
Go ahead, Dale.
I didn't really have a question, but am I on? Yeah. But I noticed, on $1.5 million, if Mr. Morgan saved us 2%, I mean, that's $30,000. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. No small amount.
Right.
Hey, Jim.
I think when you look at
I want to get back to the question. I want to get back to the other question. What is the answer to our resident who will stand up that might not understand what we're talking about here as to why we're increasing $10,000 and we've supposedly covered up all the spots that are supposed to be doing this?
I'll hazard a guess at the answer. It's probably written there, and one of the factors is for the landscape contractor, they are bound by the minimum wage law, California minimum wage law, and they have to bump probably 90% of the employees up $1 an hour this coming year. And so they're absorbing some of that and we're absorbing some of that.
Can we, as a follow-up, can we show, and I looked for it quickly on the budget and I didn't find it. I'm sure Shirley knows where it is. What is our savings on water then?
That's an ongoing process. We don't have enough data to give you a firm number as to what percentage we've been able to save. And the reason for that is in many of these areas, we're still in the establishment process of the landscape. So we're watering it more than would be normal after the plant material is established. So we do expect, which is why the water line remains the same this year, even though we're over budget on water currently. We anticipate the overwatering that we may be doing right now to establish the new plant material is going to reduce in the near future, which will allow us a more reasonable and a better idea of what our long-term savings is going to be.
We're also entering into the winter system where you're able to get, we're going to have more rain, we're going to have more water, which should reduce that as well.
Well, again,
The other item with water that you have to consider is that it's a two-level cost. There's the rate that we're charged and there's usage. So even though we might be able to in the future, because of good maintenance and good planning, reduce the usage, if they increase our rates, our actual overall cost may stay the same.
And that's a very important point that Shirley's making, and the committee and Anthony and as they put the budget together took that into consideration, and which is why you're not seeing a rush to drop the cost of water drastically. And again, I want to emphasize that currently to date, we were a little more optimistic about what kind of rain we were going to get. And we're running over budget right now based on establishing new landscape and the lack of rain. But we're still staying optimistic, feeling that the amount of water that we're using is going to start tapering down even more as we are able to throttle back on the water as the plant material gets established. And there's one other point after Joanne talks that I want to make on this subject.
Let me finish
I
my
would
question.
like to have Walt finish up his question.
I need
Did
to
you get an answer?
I think that the answer that Shirley gave and Jim jumped into it, is the correct answer. I would hope that we don't say, which was the first answer that came, is we haven't had enough time to figure it out. We've been in this process for 4 years now. So to say that we don't have enough backup material to say, what is our water rate savings? I don't think is a good thing to say publicly. I think Shirley gave us the answer, given the rates and all that. And I hope that if a question like this is asked at the meeting, we don't say we haven't had enough time yet. 4 years is certainly enough time to get at least based upon year one, what we paid, let alone into year four. I think Shirley's answer is.
I understand what you're saying, Walt, but that is the truth.
Well,
There's no question that we don't have enough time to give you an accurate
an argument. I'm just trying to say, I'm
depiction
thinking of the person that's out there.
Okay, moving on. Joanne, would you, you have?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that, if I remember Jan's telling us, is that once they complete this last section on Colony Drive, then, and that's planted and begun, then they can actually go back and look at the entire picture and tell you what the water savings would be overall. There are savings in our water bill if you look at it over the last couple of years, but it depends so much, as he said, on the rain that we get. And you typically think you're going to pay less for water in these winter months, and that makes up for the extras that you pay in the summer months. It hasn't happened yet.
And the rates go up.
Yeah, the rates go up. And the other thing I wanted to say is that people believe that because we've taken out the grass and they aren't mowing it, that should be a reduction in the time that EC uses to maintain the ground. That doesn't happen, because it's almost faster to take a mower and zip, zip, zip than it is to send 3 people up there and rake by hand and clip by hand and pick up by hand and check the system. So we don't really have a savings in that part.
Yeah, in the landscape world, the cost per square foot to maintain a planter versus the cost of per square foot to maintain turf is significantly different. So it's not an even trade-off. Even though the reason why turf sometimes might seem more is because they're doing that square footage more often than they're doing the planters. So they're not. It's difficult to put your finger on the precise difference between turf and planters based on that fact. But that's a very good point. I'm glad you brought that up, Joanne, because it's not an even swap, or it's not a considerable reduction just because you've taken the grass out.
I think that once the residents understand, when this project started 4 years ago, the reduction was going to be in the water usage, because we were informed by both water districts that they couldn't guarantee the water. We didn't know if we were going to have enough water, and if we were going to have enough water, they couldn't guarantee rates. And that's why the previous board, some 4 or 5 years ago, decided this was the way to go. And I really believe in the next couple of months, we should be able to come up with some numbers to kind of equate what does it cost to remove that and what did we actually save if we did.
And the rebates.
Yeah, we'll be able to get there. It's a little premature.
Okay, Jim, is there any other questions, or are we ready for Jim to go on?
Yep.
Jim Nash?
You go to page 89, which shows the categories major irrigation repairs. 26,400 was allocated to this category last year. This coming year, the committee is recommending transferring that funding responsibility to the reserve fund. So this goes down to 0 in the operating budget and is carried entirely by the reserve account. Similar to what we did with landscaping 3 or 4 years back. So overall, given all of this, the overall increase in landscape category is only $3,263.
You mean after all of that discussion, it's only 3,200? Okay. Thank you, Jim. I think we're ready to move on to gate entry patrol service, repair and maintenance. Jerry Stein.
Thank you, Glenn. Like the previous people have reviewed the budget, we're only going to be putting up the line items that had a change, either positive or negative. And with these 5 or 6 categories, the total increase, just by way of quick summary, is $3,890 over last year, which equates to 0.6% of an increase, that is. And by the way, if you have questions on the items that I'm not covering that were flat, no increase, no decrease, feel free to raise those as we go through. The first line is 95, which is property protection. And keep in mind, this is for our security contract. Last year, the total cost was $569,000 and change, and this year it's $585,000 and change, which is about a $15,600 increase. And this too, I know we keep talking about the mandatory minimum wage, but unfortunately, I don't think we're going to stop talking about it until 2022, and maybe even beyond, depending upon what Congress does even more, and or California. On line 95, which is the $15,640 increase, as I said, part is due to the minimum wage increase. And also, when the board contracted with Nordic, one of the considerations was that we knew there was going to be a higher cost per hour, and we were willing to pay that to attract better personnel and also have much less frequent turnover. And we're still under the contract with Nordic, and it's not going to expire until April of 2022. So we have a year and a few months to go on that contract. And the contract itself, we should point out, provided for a larger increase of approximately 4.5%. And again, kudos to Jim Morgan, because he was able to negotiate a reduction in the increase. So instead of the increase being 4.5%, it was approximately 2.7%. Are there any questions about line 95? Okay, going next to line 97, which is water service provided to the gatehouse where the personnel stay when they're on duty. Previously, we were supplying bottled water for all of their personnel, and this service has now been discontinued, which results in a savings of $1,650. Any questions? Okay, next is line 99, preventative maintenance system. And this is for the preventative maintenance of all of our 3 gate systems. That includes the gate openers, the barrier arms, the camera system, ground loops, systems, computer and printer, and other electronic and Wi-Fi systems that I frankly know absolutely nothing about. But nevertheless, it has to be all maintained. And in this case, fortunately, because we're running below the current budget amount, which was $30,100, we are suggesting a decrease in the total amount of $10,100. So the net amount for that line item would be $20,000 instead of 30,100, a net savings of $10,100. And when all of this is added up, the pluses and minuses, the net increase for the entire category is $3,890, which, as I said at the beginning, is 0.6%. Yes, Amy?
It's not listed here. I know it's got to be somewhere. I understand the preventative maintenance to keep the gates operating the way that they should, but I overview invoices, and I know we get a lot of invoices for when someone hits that arm and they come out and it's like $350 every time they come out to fix one of those arms. Where is that in the budget?
The vehicle gate repair,
Yeah, the
line
line item above
98.
it.
98?
And typically, line 98, we're trying to chase those that damaged it, and we're successful in most cases, but this $10,000 is the unknown of
Okay.
those circumstances where we aren't able to identify the perpetrator.
Okay. So then it would behoove each of us, if we see someone that crowds the arm and they ruin it, to let the office know what time, the color of the vehicle, and which gate it was, and let's catch these people.
Yeah, we go to the film footage
Okay.
and most times we're able to identify who that person or individual is and collect. But there are times where somebody breaches the system that doesn't belong here, and we have no idea where they're from, and they a lot of times will get away
Right.
without paying.
Okay.
Glenn,
Yes, Jerry,
this is preaching to
can we
the
go
choir.
on to the next section, Jerry? Are you?
Yes. The next section is
Glenn, I
line
have a question. Glenn, I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
On number 95, I know somebody, and I'm just hoping that the committee has an answer because it has nothing to do with budget night at town hall meeting. But if you're following the blogs, you all are aware there's a lot of dissatisfaction with the with the security company. I don't want somebody standing up so that you can head it off and bring this up as a topic. We paid extra money, we're not getting such and such. So I'm hoping that you're quickly ready to turn away from that and just zero in on what we're doing, because that's a different question that needs.
Yeah, that's a board question. That's not a committee question.
Well, that's
to
what I'm saying, but I
respond to.
think somebody probably will say something that night following what's on the blog. Thank you.
I think you must know how I feel. Okay,
Nervous.
go ahead, Jerry, clubhouse repair and maintenance.
Repair and maintenance, yes, that's line 103. And again, like I did before, feel free to ask questions about line items that we're not covering because there was no increase or decrease. And also, the net increase for this entire category is $2,685 a year. And the first line, 105, fire prevention equipment, is for monitoring and the inspection of the fire safety equipment that we have throughout all of the associations, buildings, and facilities. And our vendor notified the association that there would be a slight increase due to inflation. His proposed increase is $35. So I don't think we need to spend any more time on that. If you look at, and by the way, the total last year was $27.15, and so this year it's gone up by $35. Next on line 106 is what's referred to as the HVAC system, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. And this, again, is for both service and maintenance of all of the HVAC systems in the entire facility. And we have 10 HVAC units, including a 30-ton unit for the auditorium. And by the way, the maintenance and service, or preventative maintenance and service includes upgraded air filters that were installed at approximately an increase of $2,000 a year. And then also, in addition to the 10 units, there's 5 what are called mini split air units located throughout the facilities. And the remainder of the budget is to perform repairs as required. And so we're currently trending a little bit, or rather a little bit, excuse me, a little bit over budget. And so we're proposing an increase of $2,000. And this would be not only the cost of the upgraded air filters, but any unforeseen failures that might occur throughout the year. Any questions on that? So the overall jump is from 10,000 to 12,000. Okay.
No questions on that? Okay.
Pardon me?
Go ahead, Jerry.
Okay, line 107 is pest control. And this is for primarily insect control for the clubhouse and gatehouse buildings, as well as the surrounding grounds. And we're trending over budget primarily due to an increase, believe it or not, of bee swarms throughout the community that needed to be removed. And so a separate service is now being employed to handle the removal of the bees. And so in line 107, $500 is, the overall amount is decreased by $500, which is now, that money is going to be shifted into line 109 that I'll come to next. And so because of that, we're proposing a decrease from $2,000 a year to $1,500 a year. Any questions?
On the,
Amy and then Joanne. Amy, go
you say
ahead.
me first? Okay, on the bee removal, do you know what the provider does with the bees?
They're
Well, that next,
ahead.
I think they're not destroyed. They're saved somehow. I frankly, personally don't know what they do with them, but they're
Okay.
not destroyed.
Yeah, okay, and I was just wondering if someone could do a research and find someone that wants the bees for themselves and will come and do it at no cost and just take
Yeah.
the bees away?
Yeah, typically they're identified what type of bees they are. If they're the African killer bees, they're destroyed.
Okay,
But if they're the ones we want, the honeybees, that the standard bees, then there's an outfit that'll come out and relocate them
okay,
because they try to salvage them and use them. And we know that there's a scare on bees. So
okay, it's
we're
already being done. Okay, I just wanted
sensitive
to
to
check.
that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Joanne, did you have a question?
You're muted.
Muted.
You're muted, Joanne.
I had a question on the HVAC services. For the last 3 years, I think the budget's been $10,000 and we've always been under it. This year, we're only a third of it to date has been spent, but that's because we're not using the auditorium. So I'm just wondering why we're increasing at 2,000 when we've never been near that. In the year 1819, we spent 6,500. In 2019-2020, we spent 5,700, and so far this year we're at 3,400. So I don't see the increase that you're talking about.
With HVAC, the fact that we've been able to come in under budget that well is a
Yeah.
blessing. I look at it that way. The reason for keeping the amount in the area that it's at now and just allowing the cost of the filters, the better filters that we're buying now. We actually moved the filters up 2 or 3 levels to improve, especially because of the pandemic. We felt it was the right thing to do. But with regard to repairs, you just never know when you're going to have a major repair that's going to be costly. And that's more of a safety net number that gets plugged in every year. We either use it or we don't. But I want to make sure there's enough there to cover a major repair or two if it comes up. One that would be still worth doing without replacing the unit, and we can still absorb the cost, because compressors and fans and things like that are very expensive to replace on these units. And we have that 30-ton up on the roof that would be very expensive to have a major repair on that. So I think it's a safe number.
Okay, it's a cushion they're putting in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jerry.
Okay, next is line 109, pest control, dealing with rodents and squirrels. And now, of course, we're going to be adding bees to that item. And we don't really anticipate any increase for the rodent control, those squirrels and other rodents. But as we said, and by the way, so we're budgeting for the rodent portion $17,400, which is the same as last year. The increase is due to the bee removal situation, and we're now adding 6 landscape bee removals at $150 each, and we're adding 1 structure bee removal at $250. And so this adds an additional $1,150 to that line item, and that's the amount the committee is suggesting of an increase.
That's an educated guesstimate as to what could happen. It's based on past experience here with bees. It's not an exact thing. We don't know how many we're going to have. Hopefully it'll be less, but that's what that, and the reason it was moved is because that's the company that happens to do the actual bee removals for us.
And so the overall increase in all these categories, line items, was $2,685, due primarily to the shifting of the bee removal and the upgraded air filters. Are there any questions?
Jim Nash, the question for you is, under the HVAC, is that because it's maintenance and not replacement for that repair, that it can't come out of reserves?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on, we look like we're ready to head into the taxes, clubhouse operations with Chuck Gordon. Chuck?
Thank you, Glenn. The clubhouse operations ends on line 115, and it consists of approximately 12 categories. The clubhouse operations total budget in the preceding year was $112,730, and we're proposing it increase to $116,350, which is a difference of $3,620. And that represents an increase of 3.2%. There's basically 3 line items that are causing the increase. The first one is on line 117. It's indoor plant maintenance service. The prior budget was $5,800, and the proposed new budget is $5,920. It's a very small increase of $120 or 2%. And when the committee questioned Jim on it, he said it was because of the vendor is increasing the service for that amount. That would account for the additional $120.
Talking about the dumbbell man?
No, no, I think we're talking about the flowers and the plants.
Plants, yeah.
Probably minimum wage again.
Could be, but nevertheless, it's a 2% increase, which is,
Yeah, it's negligible,
modest.
yeah.
Moving on, the next line item where there is an increase, it's line 123 under fitness equipment, maintenance and repair.
That's what I was talking about.
Oh, okay. Well, here we are. It was 3,000. It's going, we were recommending it go up 1,000, which would put the new budget amount at 4,000. And the committee did question Jim on it when we had our meetings.
Chuck,
Jim pointed out, yes.
we just approved the dumbbell man's renewal and there was no increase.
Oh, okay. Well, the reason why Jim wanted to bring it up an additional 1,000, we had this discussion with the committee. It was the view that with the equipment aging, there's going to be the expectation that the equipment will have additional repairs down the road as it ages through usage. Moreover, the equipment is highly sophisticated, at least in some of the components use computerized parts. So the expectation there is not only will there be the probability of a greater amount of repairs, but even more higher costly amount of repairs as well due to the computerized equipment. So just to err on the side of caution, we were proposing that the budget go up 1,000 to cover these expectations for more repairs and more costly repairs.
And it's similar to the logic used with the HVAC. It's just making sure there's enough money to cover a few major repairs or replacing a walking deck on a treadmill, or a belt. Those are very costly repairs that are not covered under any kind of warranty because they're use issues based on use. So, and like Chuck was saying, the computer boards on these things, when they're out of warranty, can get costly. So again, having a few extra bucks in there is it's a safety net more than anything else. It's not driven by the preventative maintenance. It's just whether there's a potential for a major repair or two.
And everybody looks good if we don't use it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Chuck.
Okay, moving on to the next item where there's an increase in this budget for clubhouse operations. That's line 124, and that falls under janitorial supplies and maintenance. And basically, this is all systemic to the COVID-19 pandemic, where staff has had an exponential increase in using disinfecting materials and general cleaning supplies. And even though we're now transitioning, hopefully, out of the COVID-19 pandemic period into more normalcy, there is the expectation that there's going to be quite a few months where we're going to be using heavy amounts of disinfectant and heavy amounts of general cleaning supplies over the course of several months at least. So we're thinking that the budget, which was originally $22,500, and we are, by the way, trending over budget at the moment. We'd like it to go up $2,500 to $25,000 to cover us during this transitional period, where the expectation is we're going to be using a lot of disinfectant and a lot of cleaning material. Therefore, the clubhouse operations budget sits at an additional $3,620, which is just an increase of 3.2%. Any questions?
Question.
Go ahead, Tom.
You know, if you got rid of part of the coffee and part of the candy, you could save $1 on the $3 you want to do, Glenn. You can laugh all you want, but I'm just saying, I'm looking out for all the homeowners. That's why I would like to see the actual costs. You know, this really don't tell you much unless you have the actual column.
I think you have to understand, they did not spend $9,000.
$9,000 for coffee is kind of ridiculous. And I haven't drank a cup of coffee in here in a year. and I haven't eaten no candy. And I just think that's a little ridiculous. You know, could be a savings there for the general
Okay,
people.
Mary Ann? You have a question?
no, I was talking to my dog.
Oh, any other questions on that? Tom, I think we should understand that they did not spend $9,000 this year for coffee. So if you cut out $9,000, they won't be buying coffee for next year. That's what the budget is for next year.
Glenn, that's why I said to you at the very beginning, you should have the extra costs on this side that we already had. And it's not here. You're just taking from this budget, shoved to this budget. You had extra costs, you had something to go by.
I agree, but each year is different. And this was a special year.
I understand that. I go through that every year. But you guys should have had an extra cost at 2019. Because we already got a certified account for it. Why not it on here?
Well, if I could just make a comment, I think what point Glenn was making is that there's definitely a savings this year on that coffee line. And it's not a carryover as far as actual dollars, because every year we look at the budget and allocate funds however the business plan is going to work for the community. So even though we budgeted the 9,000 and saved probably that amount up to date by not buying any candy or any coffee, that's good for the bottom line for this current year that we're in. But this particular budget is reflecting, hopefully, a level of normalcy, getting back to where we were, where under a normal hours of operation and use of the clubhouse and that type of thing. So if the board were to consider, and I'm not suggesting this, but based on what you just said, if the board were to consider eliminating coffee and eliminating the candy, then yeah, that's exactly what it would be, a $9,000 savings. We wouldn't purchase any coffee. So again, this budget plan is just trying to put together a business plan based on as normal of an operation as we can get it based on the circumstances. Hopefully as close to post COVID-19 as we can possibly get it. But even that's still not for sure. But that I think is at least a point I wanted to make for you. And we can talk more if you'd like about it.
Glenn, can I ask, can you refresh my memory? The budget is from May 1st to?
Yeah, it's May 1 to April 30.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any more questions for Chuck? And we'll move on to taxes, and Shirley Rose, please.
Thank you, Glenn. We are on line 131, 132, and 133, which are the federal, California, and property real estate taxes. We don't have a change anticipated for the 21-22 year from this year. We pay federal taxes at a 30% tax rate on non-related income. So money that we make on investments, interest, money that we make on interest and fees, that not the homeowner fees, but where we charge somebody for an infraction or a ticket or interest that we charge, we have to pay federal taxes on those dollars. It's a small amount of our revenue, small percentage of our revenue. And in 2021, we are actually paying on the income that was generated in 1920, and in 21-22, we'll be paying on the income that was generated in 2021. Even though our interest rates are decreasing, as you all know, I'm sure you're vitally aware of that, we anticipate that the income tax related to those interest income will remain at about the same level as this year. So $25,000 for the federal income tax, 10,000 for California tax, and the 11,000 is for the real estate property tax that we pay on the lot that we purchased at the corner of Avenida Florita and Colony Drive, which we someday will have an exemption that we have applied for but haven't received. So no change in those from current budget year is anticipated.
Any questions of Shirley?
No one wants to ask questions about taxes.
Nah.
Okay, moving on to the reserve account, Jim Nash, please.
Thank you, Glenn. As the board knows, every month, a portion of our income is contributed to the reserve fund. This money is set aside to replace and repair all our common area assets. In the current year, the budgeted contributions were $810,000 for the 12-month period. And we're on schedule to meet that. As you also know, we contracted out for the updating of our reserve study. The draft of that report was just submitted late last week and has not been finalized. In the absence of that report and recommendation from our consultant, the committee relied on last year's report, which projected a need to increase contributions to $850,500. I view it as a tentative number. Once the updated reserve study is finalized, that recommendation will be substituted for the number you see today. And then next line is interest earnings. The reserve contributions from homeowner association dues are supplemented by interest earnings, projected to be less than the current year by approximately $4,700. And this is based primarily on the advice that we received from our investment advisors. Any questions on reserves?
Yeah, Jim,
I have one.
go ahead, Joanne.
Jim, in the past, we had a projected report that showed what percentage we felt the reserves would be at for about at least 5 years out. And I know it dipped down mostly because of the water conservation stuff that we did, but it was supposed to start climbing up, I thought, next year, like 1% or 2% a year. Is that where this doesn't seem to me?
That was the projection, but I think it's premature to say what it's going to be at the end of this year until we get the final report.
That 40,000 isn't going to do a whole lot, though, is it?
Well, it will, based on what our plan is going to be
To spend.
for this upcoming year in expenses. So, and we're already looking, we've already been talking about the possibility of deferring some of the scheduled things for this year, some big ticket items that will significantly help that.
So can you bring to the board next time or when you get your actuals so we kind of know what to look for in the reserve percentages as we look out for a few years?
Well, before you get get to your final budget, you're going to approve the final, what we believe is the final update for the reserve study.
Sure,
So
yeah.
you'll know all that, you'll have it, and then it'll be applied to the budget. You'll actually probably do them on both on the same day that you approve the budget. You'll approve the reserve
So
study.
we'll see that.
Just
Okay.
prior to that, yeah.
And
Sorry, Jim, go ahead.
That's,
So that was the last section of the expense side of the budget. And we totaled all those up. The increase in expenses for this year is $111,182.
Good job.
Are there any other questions of Jim?
Well, just one thing, I know when we did the budget last year, I remember Jim saying that this year we would probably be at least 5%. So, I mean, this isn't anywhere near 5%. I do remember him saying, be kind of prepared for that kind of an increase this year.
It was a different year. And so we made a concerted effort to go to our vendors and contractors and and do our best to get costs held as much as we could. And pretty much everybody responded in some way. And that's reflected in this budget.
You don't ask, you don't get. That's
Yeah. We were proactive on that respect, in that respect.
Good job.
Okay, moving on to the balance of this workshop. Now that we've covered the projected expenses for this upcoming year, we can focus on the income needed to maintain this balanced budget. People know we have two sources of income, with a major one, of course, being homeowners, assessments. We have other sources to supplement this, the assessments, which we will review. Given the projected expenses for the coming year, at this time, we are recommending an increase in homeowner assessments by $57,000 at $57,096, or $3 per homeowner per month. This represents an increase from the current $252 to $255 per month, or an increase of 1.2%. And I like to use an old technique where you try to figure out what is it really costing us and breaking it down. If you take $36, $3 a month times 12 months, you're looking at $36. You could break that down. That's right at 1 cent per day is what it's costing to do a $3 a month increase.
Glenn,
Yes,
could I ask you not to say per homeowner, but per home?
okay.
There are some joint account holders, homeowners.
So
Are you saying it's per residence, right?
Okay,
Is that correct?
that's correct.
Per member, there's only one member per household. No matter how many people are in the house, it's one
I didn't know
membership.
that.
So you only have one vote per lot, so it's one membership.
I see. I knew that. Thank you.
No problem.
Now,
Did you say a penny? Glenn, did you say a penny a day times 30 days is 30 cents?
there's 365 days a year. Divide by $36.
That's
Divide $36 into 365 days per year, and it's right at, it's actually
10
a hair
cents.
less.
10 cents.
The 10
I
cents,
wanna- Pardon me?
10 cents.
10 cents, not a penny.
Right.
It's still a small amount. Yeah.
It's a small amount, yeah.
I want to call your attention to line 3, which is the golf course activity. In the past few years, we've not received any gate revenues from the golf course. However, we think the receiver that's now in place, we are expecting fees to be paid. That's what's going to happen, and that happens to be a lower amount. On questions on line 3? Line 4.
When is it gonna happen?
I don't know. We'll have to check with management.
As early as next month, they're gonna make a payment. And my understanding is they intend to hopefully pay a little more than what the monthly invoice amount is for that current month, to try to start paying off some of the back amounts that are owed since the judgment.
Okay, moving on to line 4, which is gate access fees. They've averaged around $3,500 in the past couple of years, so we've lowered the expectations down to $500. Line 5 is the key income. This is for your keys. That's also been reduced $500 based on actual income in the past. Line 9, prior year surplus, shows a recommended use of $6,411 for next year's budget. This will offset some of the increase in expenses and save homeowners approximately 34 cents a month. Line 10, the golf course settlement account. Proposed budget includes a use of $135,000 to offset the anticipated legal costs associated with the golf course litigation. The committee agreed that this was an appropriate use of these funds. And are there any questions about that? Any comments? Joanne? Joanne, you're muted. Joanne, you are muted.
Again, if we win those lawsuits, that money, we will collect that money from them. It will go back into the golf course account.
Okay, thank you.
Glenn, do you mind if I take a moment to emphasize a few things on this line? And it might even answer a little bit of what Walt was asking about earlier.
And also Tom has a question. Maybe it'll answer both.
Well, let Tom go first and then I'll speak up.
Well, I don't know if you can do it, but I'm going to ask that question. Why can't you take, how much we got in there? 300 some thousand?
343,000.
341,000.
Okay. Why can't you take some of that to offset some of the dues? The people paid that in.
So
why can't you take it and take?
So when the board set up that separate account with that 300 and some change at the time, I think it was around $315,000 that we had received back between what was received in the judgment and what had to be paid to the insurance companies for their portion of attorney's fees. We ended up with 315-ish, somewhere in that ballpark. The board at that time had made a determination, because we were still litigating, that it wanted to set that money aside in a separate account, that it would not be touched unless it was golf course litigation related. So that was the philosophy when they put that money aside. This year, and what this line reflects this year, with the full amount of $135,000 is being offset with those funds from that separate bank account. So $7.10 per month per door is being used of that money. Otherwise, your assessments would have gone up that amount if we were not using that. So the board is doing that this year. They're using $135,000 of the 341 to offset the assessment this year, the budget, the income. So to take it further than that would be extending into an area that would leave the philosophy that the board had when it put that money there in the first place.
Before you.
And so one more point I want to make, Tom.
Wait. Let me have my point.
Well, it's on the same subject, and I'll give you the floor.
On the same subject too, Jim. Right?
Tom,
Nobody said that when we got to that was going to offset that.
What?
When we got to the point of line item 52, where you made $135,000 for the golf course, nobody said that we're going to take that part of that 315,000 and apply it to that account.
Well, that was intentional,
Correction.
Was you? Did you?
Tom, I did say that we will talk about this when we get to the revenue section. And that way you'll understand it more. I did say that.
Okay.
And so now we're bringing it up.
Okay.
How it's going to fund that line 52 is with that separate bank account of golf revenues that we received for attorney's fees during the lawsuit, and any other fees that any other attorney's fees, the board will have the choice, and I would imagine they'll follow the same philosophy and put any other monies we receive for attorney's fees, put it right in that account, so that instead of raising your dues to pay for the lawsuit, we're going to use the money we're getting back as we are having attorney fees paid to us by the owner of the golf course.
I understand.
Okay, good. So that's all that was for. And we think that because the lawsuit, normally you don't like to use too much equity surplus funds without increasing the assessment, because it's a false sense of security. You end up with a huge increase down the road. But with this particular line, we look at it as a short-term matter. In other words, we're not kicking a can too far down the road with this. So with that $340,000 that sits there right now, that's at least 2 years, maybe 3 years of litigation, attorney's fees, we hope that would cover if we were to not receive any money back. So that would help from increasing your assessments. Plus, it's not a can you're literally kicking down the road, because eventually it's going to go away. So that's why we separated it on the spreadsheet here on lines 9 and 10, even though they're the same GL code. We wanted to make a distinction between the surplus that's being used for litigation and the surplus that's being used for the rest of the budget to offset the assessment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me, but you guys better explain it pretty good to the audience.
Well, some are listening to it now, so we're live now. So
I understand what you're doing, but make sure you explain it pretty clear.
Are there any more questions?
I think we've got a pretty good handle on what that money represents.
That takes care of line 10. Were there any other questions on line 10? Line 11, late fees and interest charges. Anticipate a lower allowance for this category. This is based on the trend so far in the current year. So that's why you'll see a reduction of $4,000. Lines 14 and 15, interest earned from the operating accounts and interest earned from reserves. I've had conversations with our financial advisors, and they have told me, and other members of the committee, Jim and I spoke with them, the interest rates during this year have gone just terribly down. We have different investments, and most of them are in CDs, and the CD rates are 0.005, 0.001, and we're talking about this. Our policy has been to invest in anywhere from 1 to 4 years. Well, the advisor says you don't want to invest for 4 years at this rate. What we want to do is when something comes due, we move it into another, to a different place, a different company. Maybe they decide and give us the option of saying yes or no, but for shorter terms. That has to be our policy now until the rates come back. That's why the amount of money that we take in, besides homeowners' dues, this used to be a lot of money. Our interest we received on our investments, but it's not very good now. So line 8, any questions on that? Line number 18, total income. It illustrates the total income of $5,116,871, which makes us short $111,182 to balance the budget. The $3 per homeowner balances our budget for this fiscal year.
Glenn,
Yes.
I have a question for you. I have a banking background, as you know. I invested in I-bonds. Can homeowners associations invest in I-bonds? Right now, they're earning 4.08%.
How much is it?
Well, typically it's a CD and a treasury note.
Yes, I know. I know that, but I've never had that question about U.S. savings bonds.
And I know that's something, Jim Nash, are you familiar with that?
No, but I think the current investment policy that's been adopted by the board limits the type of investments we can make.
I'll just look into it.
It doesn't currently include the I-bonds.
Check it out.
Yeah, one of the things, Mary Ann, that I talked to Walt about after our last meeting, next month, in the month of February, we need to review the homeowners association's investment policy. I have a copy of it and I'm going to bring it down and they can make copies, but board should know and should understand how we're going about this and review this policy for future years.
As long as you're FDIC or FSLIC insured, you're okay.
So,
I have a question, Glenn.
yes, sorry.
It may be budget related, but maybe not. But Mr. Morgan, we talk about the money that we're spending to sue these people and then the money that we may or may not get back. If the thing eventually goes into foreclosure, will we get money back then or is it gone?
With regard to attorney's fees, is what you're talking about?
Regard to whatever that we're owed at the time. If the owners owe us a bunch of money and it goes into foreclosure, do we get anything or is that gone?
Well, that specific question probably should be answered by Ryan,
Okay.
which would be an attorney-client privilege discussion.
Okay, I'm okay.
So yeah, we should probably have that conversation somewhere else.
Okay.
Are there any other questions from the board or from the committee? I'd like to go on the record as saying that I've not been too much of a part of this for reasons that most people know about, but I want to thank each and every one of the finance committee. They've worked very hard for this, and I'd be a darn fool not to support these folks and the effort that they have made to put this together. I know we're going to get a lot of questions
Excellent.
coming up when we have the open meeting, but I thoroughly support the effort they've put into this. Maybe we could find a few dollars here or there, but you also have to look down the road. $3 is not that much. If we were able to reduce it, what is it going to do to us next year? You're going to add whatever we reduce this year is going to be added on next year. And I think most people would rather take it in small increments as opposed to large.
Glenn, I want to, as the president, I want to thank the finance committee, each and every one of you, including Jim Morgan, Jim Nash. As I look at all of your pictures, Glenn, you've done an outstanding job, but you've done a thankless job. We, as a board, appreciate it. And I think that the community, when they get to see this, hear it, and read it, hopefully that they will deeply appreciate the hours, not just the work, the hours that you've put in to pull this together. So I want to go on record as officially thanking each of you for the time spent, for your diligence, for your work, for your care, for your love for the community, that you have spent this time. And I'm trusting that a month from now, when this is discussed, that the love from the community will come through to you in a very thankless job that you have in order to do what you did.
Here,
So I
here.
want to thank you. And for those of us on the board, let's give a little hand to this committee for a great job done.
Thank you.
Thank you so very, very much. Glenn, if that's it, coming back to me, I would support a motion to adjourn.
Second it.
Second it. All those in favor from the board signify by a hand. Great. Thank you again. Bye.
Good night.
Hi.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
It was a long week today.
I thought you were